Hey, my name is Theodore Carter, but most people just call me Theo. I'm 27, and I've been working as an electrician in New York for 5 years now. It's not the kind of job that puts you in a suit and tie or gets you invited to fancy offices with glass walls. I spend my days pulling wires through old walls, fixing breaker panels, replacing outlets, and crawling through damp basements or sweating in attics during the summer. My hands are always a little rough, and my clothes usually smell like sawdust and hot metal by the end of the day. It's honest work, though. It pays the rent on my small apartment in Brooklyn and keeps me busy enough that I don't spend too much time thinking about what's missing. Most weeks, the thing I look forward to the most isn't the paycheck. It's the 2 evenings I stop by Gilded Spoon after I finish a job. I tell myself it's because the coffee is strong and the soup is always hot on rainy nights. The place is quiet enough that I can sit in the back corner booth without anyone bothering me. But if I'm being honest with myself, and I try not to be too honest about this, I go there because of Hannah Scott. Hannah works as a waitress there. She usually covers the section with my booth. She remembers I take my coffee black, no sugar. She remembers I order the soup on cold days without me having to ask. She even remembers I always put my phone on the left side of the table and my water glass on the right. I know for her it's probably just good service. For me, those small things make a long day feel a little less heavy. She has soft brown hair that she usually ties back, and her eyes are gentle but tired, like she's carrying something she doesn't talk about. She smiles at every customer, even the difficult ones, and she moves through the room with this quiet patience that makes the whole place feel calmer. I once saw her slip a free slice of cake to a little girl who was crying in the corner. Another time I caught her leaning against the wall in the back hallway after her shift, eyes closed for just a few seconds like she needed that tiny moment of rest before she could keep going. I've liked her for months, maybe longer, but I've never said anything. I don't know if she's seeing someone. And even if she isn't, I don't want to be the guy who makes her feel like she has to smile for a tip. So I keep my distance. Every time she walks up to my table, I try to look normal. "Still the usual, Theo?" she asks, pen already poised over her notepad. "Unless you're planning to talk me into something dangerous tonight," I say, folding the menu even though I already know what I want. She laughs soft and quick. "I don't think you're ready for that." Those little exchanges have become the best part of my week. Until tonight. When she comes to my table, I know right away something is wrong. Her smile is too tight. Her hand holding the order pad trembles just a little. Her eyes look red like she's been crying, but tried to hide it with makeup. I set my water glass down. "Rough day?" I ask quietly. She opens her mouth like she's about to say she's fine, but when she meets my eyes, whatever wall she was holding up cracks. She glances toward the counter to make sure her manager isn't watching, then slides into the chair across from me. Her voice is barely above a whisper. "Theo, can I ask you something really weird?" My heart starts beating faster, but I keep my face steady. "Go ahead." She looks down at her hands, twisting her fingers together on the table. Then she tells me about Alex. They dated for almost 3 years. She thought they were going to get married. She believed they had a future. But he left her for Gloria, someone prettier, more successful, the kind of woman who wears expensive dresses and fits the life he wants now. This weekend, Hannah has to go to an old friend's wedding, and Alex and Gloria will both be there. She doesn't want to walk in alone. She doesn't want Alex to look at her like leaving her was the smartest decision he ever made. I hate the way she talks about herself, like she's the one who got left behind and that somehow makes her less. But I understand the fear underneath it. She isn't trying to get revenge. She just doesn't want to feel small. After a long silence, she lifts her head. Her cheeks are flushed with embarrassment. "You don't have to say yes, Theo, seriously, but would you go to the wedding with me?" Before I can answer, she adds even quieter. "As my husband." I freeze. For a second, I wonder if I heard her wrong. The rest of me is just trying to keep breathing while the woman I've been quietly watching for months asks me to pretend to be the closest person in her life. She sees my silence and panics. "Forget it. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm sorry. That was too much." She starts to stand. I reach out and catch her wrist gently, just enough to stop her. I haven't said no yet. She turns back, eyes wide. I take a breath and try to keep my voice calm even though my chest feels tight. Before I answer, I need to know one thing. What? I look at her and ask, does this fake husband get to dance with his wife? For a moment, she just stares. Then she laughs, even though her eyes are still wet. Probably, I nod. Then I'm in. She looks at me for a long time like she can't quite believe I actually agreed. Are you sure? She whispers. I meet her eyes and try not to let her see how long I've wanted to stand beside her like this, even if it's only pretend. I'm sure. When she finally walks away, her steps look lighter than they did when she sat down. I stay in the booth a while longer, staring at my now cold coffee. The decision feels completely insane. But underneath that, I know this might be the only chance I ever get to step into her world, even if it's just playing a role. I have no idea that the role is going to become the most real thing I've ever had. In the days before the wedding, Hannah and I met a couple of times to get our story straight. We decided we had been married for 6 months after keeping things quiet for a while. I was still an electrician. She still worked at Gilded Spoon because she was saving to open her own small cafe one day. She didn't want anything fancy, just a warm place with soft yellow lights, a few old wooden tables, the smell of fresh coffee in the air, and a quiet corner where people could read or write on rainy afternoons. I listened without saying much while she talked about it. But in my head, I was already picturing the space. I could see myself running wires behind freshly painted walls, hanging pendant lights over the counter, making sure every corner lit up exactly the way she wanted. I kept that picture to myself. It felt too dangerous to say out loud. Hannah took the whole thing seriously. She wrote down my birthday, my job details, even what I liked to eat. According to the story we made up, we met when I came to fix the electrical panel at the restaurant and slowly got to know each other. I laughed when she told me that part. That one's actually pretty close to the truth, I said. She looked up from her notebook, surprised. It is? I first noticed you the day I came to fix the breaker behind the kitchen. You were arguing with the espresso machine. She blinked, then laughed. I don't even remember that. I do. She studied me for a second. So you've been remembering me since then? I looked away and shrugged. I have a good memory. She didn't push, but I could tell she didn't believe that was the whole story. On the day of the wedding, I drove to her apartment to pick her up. I was wearing a dark suit I had borrowed from a friend. It felt strange against my skin. I was used to thick work shirts and boots, not dress shoes that pinched. My hands were clean, but the calluses and small scars from years of work were still there. When Hannah opened the door, I almost forgot how to speak. She wore a simple, deep blue dress, her hair pulled back loosely. No heavy jewelry, nothing flashy. She looked beautiful in a way that made my throat go tight. She looked at me up and down and gave a small, shy smile. You look different from the guy who usually sits in the corner drinking black coffee. I held out my hand. Apparently, fake husbands have a dress code. She placed her hand on my arm. The touch was light but sent a current straight through me. I already knew tonight was going to be harder than I had expected. I could play the role in front of other people. I wasn't sure I could pretend my heart wasn't involved. At the wedding, Alex showed up with Gloria. The second Hannah saw them, her whole body tensed. Her fingers tightened around my arm. I leaned down and spoke quietly near her ear. Look at me. Not at them. She lifted her eyes to mine. I rested my hand on the small of her back, close enough to steady her without making her uncomfortable. You don't have to prove anything to him tonight, I said. You're not alone. Alex spotted her almost immediately. He walked over, his eyes moving from Hannah to me and back again. When she introduced me as her husband, the surprise on his face was obvious. When did this happen? He asked. I didn't hear anything about it. Hannah stiffened beside me. I gave her hand a gentle squeeze and answered before she had to. We wanted to keep it private for a while. Hannah doesn't like turning personal things into a show for other people. It shut him down without making him look like an asshole for asking more questions. I stayed in character the whole evening. I pulled out her chair. I got her drinks. I remembered she hated onions in her salad. When people asked how we met, I told the story we had practiced, but I added small, real details without thinking, the way she laughs when she's nervous, how she always puts other people first, how she can make even a loud restaurant feel quieter just by being there. Hannah turned and looked at me while I was talking. Her expression had changed, like she was trying to figure out where the acting ended and something else began. I was starting to lose track of that line myself. When the slow song started, I turned to her and offered my hand. "Does my wife feel like dancing?" She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Only if my husband doesn't step on my feet." I placed my hand on her waist. She rested hers on my shoulder. We moved slowly across the floor. Alex stood off to the side, watching us. Gloria was next to him, but his eyes stayed on Hannah. At first, it made her shoulders tight. Then I tightened my hold on her waist just a little. She looked up at me. "I almost forgot he was here," she said softly. "Good," I answered. "Tonight isn't about him." "Then what is it about?" I looked at her for a long moment. I wanted to say it was about us, but I didn't have the right to say that, so I just said, "It's about you having a good time." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned in a little closer. Her cheek almost brushed mine. I could smell the faint scent of her shampoo and feel the warmth of her through the thin fabric of her dress. My heart was beating too hard for something that was supposed to be pretend. By the end of the night, Alex looked openly unhappy. He couldn't understand how the woman he had left was now smiling beside someone else. The satisfaction I felt at first faded quickly. I realized I didn't care what Alex thought anymore. I only cared that Hannah's hand was still in mine and that, when the night ended, this version of us would have to end too. I drove her home in silence. The air in the car felt different from when we had left earlier. Something had shifted, and neither of us seemed ready to name it yet. When I pulled up in front of her building, she didn't get out right away. She sat with her small purse in her lap, looking down at her hands. "So our marriage is over already," she said quietly. I tried to smile. "Short, but not terrible." She smiled back, but her eyes stayed on me. After a moment, she asked, "Do you want to come up for some tea?" I knew I should say no. I knew the smart thing was to keep the distance we had agreed on, but I nodded anyway. We sat in her small living room, still wearing our wedding clothes, sharing leftovers from the fridge. There was no one left to perform for. No Alex, no Gloria. Just the two of us and the quiet between us that suddenly felt heavier than before. She talked more about the cafe she wanted to open. I told her about the jobs I had done, about the strange satisfaction of finishing a wiring job and watching a dark room come alive. She listened like every word mattered. "I like the way you talk about light," she said after a while. I felt my face warm. "It's just my job." "No," she said softly. "It's not just a job. You talk like turning on the lights in a room can pull someone out of the dark." I didn't know what to say to that. So I stayed quiet and let the words sit between us. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside her apartment, everything felt still, like we were both waiting to see what would happen next. The ride back to her apartment was quiet, but it wasn't the same quiet we had on the way to the wedding. Something had changed in the space between us. I could still feel the weight of her hand on my arm from earlier and the way she had leaned into me on the dance floor. When I parked in front of her building, she didn't get out right away. She sat with her purse in her lap, looking down at her fingers. "So our marriage is over already," she said softly. I tried to keep it light. "Short, but not terrible." She smiled, but her eyes stayed on me. After a moment, she asked if I wanted to come up for tea. I should have said no. Instead, I followed her inside. We sat on the floor of her small living room, still in our wedding clothes, eating leftovers straight from the containers. No one left to impress, no Alex watching, just us. She talked more openly than she ever had at the restaurant. She told me how after Alex left, the worst part wasn't losing him. It was the feeling that she hadn't been enough. That maybe if she had been more successful or more polished, he would have stayed. I felt anger rise in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "Him leaving doesn't prove you were missing something, Hannah. It only proves he didn't know what he had." She looked at me for a long time. "And what do you see?" The question sat between us. I could have lied. I could have kept playing it safe. Instead, I told her the truth I had been holding on to for months. I told her I had noticed her the first day I came to fix the electrical panel at Gilded Spoon. I told her I paid attention to the way she treated people even when no one was looking, how she stayed kind even when life hadn't been kind to her. I told her that kind of softness was rarer than she probably realized. Her eyes turned glassy. The space between us felt smaller than it had any right to be. I looked at her mouth, then back at her eyes, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She whispered my name, barely more than a breath. I leaned in and kissed her. It started slow, careful, like we were both afraid the moment would break. But when her hands came up and gripped the front of my shirt, something inside me gave way. After that night, we stopped pretending we only saw each other because of Alex. She started stopping by job sites after her shifts, bringing me coffee from the cart down the block while I checked breaker panels. I waited outside Gilded Spoon on nights she closed, and we walked through the quiet streets talking about small things, foods she hated, strange clients I had worked for, her dream of the cafe. We never called it dating, but every evening we spent together felt like two people who were already in something real. One night we were sitting on her living room floor again, surrounded by Chinese takeout boxes. An old movie was playing on the TV with the sound turned low. She told me that after Alex left, the thing that hurt most was believing she wasn't worth staying for. I reached over and took her hand. "You don't have to be anything other than who you are for someone to stay," I said. "The right person won't need you to audition." She looked at me like she was seeing something she had been afraid to hope for. The air between us changed again. I leaned in. This time the kiss wasn't careful. It was hungry and honest. She climbed into my lap and I held her like I had been waiting years instead of months. We didn't sleep together that night either. We just stayed close, talking until the sky started to lighten outside her window. I left before sunrise, but something between us had settled into place. I thought we were finally moving towards something real. And then the call came. A contractor I had worked with years ago reached out about a long-term project in Chicago. They needed a lead electrician for a big commercial building. The pay was significantly better than anything I was making in New York. There was a real path to becoming a supervisor within a couple of years. It was the kind of opportunity most guys in my line of work waited their whole careers for and rarely got. I told myself I was going to turn it down. I didn't mention it to Hannah at first, but she found out anyway. Maybe she overheard a phone call. Maybe someone in the trade mentioned it. Either way, when I showed up at her place that evening, she already knew. "Are you staying because of me?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. She took that as confirmation. The shift in her was immediate and sharp. Her voice turned cold in a way I had never heard from her before. She said we had gone too far from what this was supposed to be, just a favor between two people who barely knew each other. She said she wasn't sure her feelings were real or just leftover pain from Alex. I tried to stay calm. "Look at me, Hannah. You don't have to say things like that if you're just scared." She turned her face away. "I'm not scared. I'm being honest." I felt something crack in my chest. Then what was the kiss? What were all the nights we stayed up talking? What the hell has this been? She wrapped her arms around herself. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady even though her eyes were shining. "Maybe I just needed someone after Alex left. Maybe you were the right person at the right time, Theo, that's all." The words hit harder than I expected. I stood there staring at her, trying to find the woman who had leaned into me on the dance floor, who had kissed me like she meant it. "You really believe that?" I asked. She didn't take it back. She just looked at me and said, "You should take the job in Chicago. Don't throw away a real future because of me." I let out a short, bitter laugh that didn't sound like me. "So that's all this was?" She didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. I left her apartment that night without another word. I kept waiting for her to call after me in the hallway. I kept hoping she would open the door and say she didn't mean it, that she was just afraid, that I wasn't some replacement she could throw away when things got complicated. But all I heard was the sound of her door closing behind me. I believed her. I believed I had been stupid enough to fall for someone who was still carrying an empty space left by another man. A few days later, I accepted the job in Chicago. I packed what I needed, said goodbye to the city I had lived in my whole life, and drove west with a weight in my chest that didn't ease no matter how many miles I put between us. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until much later, was that after I left, Hannah had slid down the wall in her hallway and cried until she couldn't breathe. She hadn't pushed me away because she didn't love me. She had pushed me away because she loved me enough to believe she would only hold me back. But I didn't know that then. All I knew was that the woman I had finally let myself want had looked me in the eye and told me I was nothing more than a stand-in, and I had been foolish enough to believe her. I had been in Chicago for almost 2 months. The job was exactly what they had promised. Long hours on big commercial sites, real responsibility, a team that respected what I could do with my hands. The pay was better than anything I had made in New York, and there was talk of moving me into a supervisory role if the project kept going well. Every morning I woke up in a rented apartment that still smelled like fresh paint and went to work in buildings that were still just steel and concrete. At night, I came back to silence. Most evenings I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand, staring at Hannah's name and my contacts, but never pressing call. I told myself it was better this way. She had made herself clear. I was just the person who happened to be there when she needed someone to stand beside her for one night. Nothing more, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw her anyway. I saw the way her hand had felt in mine on the dance floor. I heard the soft laugh she gave when I asked if the fake husband got to dance with his wife. I remembered the taste of her mouth the night we kissed on her living room floor. The way she had climbed into my lap like she had been waiting for that moment as long as I had. And then I remembered the last thing she said to me. Maybe you were just the right person at the right time. Those words followed me through every long day on the job site. They sat with me while I ate alone in the company truck during lunch. They kept me awake at night when the city outside my window stayed loud and unfamiliar. Back in New York, Hannah was still working at Gilded Spoon. She tried to act like everything was normal, but the people who knew her best could see she wasn't okay. Maya, her closest friend, was one of them. Maya had known from the beginning that our marriage was fake. She had known I was only supposed to be there for one night to help Hannah get through the wedding. When she finally cornered Hannah in the back hallway after a shift and asked why she had pushed me away, Hannah had started crying before she could even finish the question. I told him to go because I love him, Hannah had said through tears. If he stayed for me, he would have regretted it later. He has a real chance out there. I'm just a waitress with a broken heart and a dream that might never happen. I couldn't let him throw that away for someone like me. Maya had been furious. She told Hannah she was being stupid, that what Theo felt for her had nothing to do with pity or timing. But Hannah wouldn't hear it. She kept saying the same thing over and over. She had done the right thing by letting me go. Alex overheard every word. He had started coming to Gilded Spoon again after things with Gloria fell apart. That night he was standing just around the corner from the hallway when he heard Maya say the marriage had been fake from the start. The second he understood that part, everything else clicked into place for him. If the whole husband act had been a performance, then maybe Hannah had only been trying to make him jealous. Maybe she still had feelings for him. Maybe he still had a chance. He started showing up more often after that. At first it was flowers left at the hostess stand with her name on them. Then it was long messages apologizing for how he had handled things, telling her he had made a mistake choosing Gloria. One night he waited outside after her shift ended, leaning against his car like he used to when they were together. I know everything now, he told her. I know Theo wasn't really your husband. I know you were just trying to get through the wedding without looking pathetic. Hannah had gone very still. You don't know anything. But Alex kept talking. He told her he and Gloria were done. He said he had been wrong to think he needed someone flashy and successful. He said the only person who had ever really understood him was her. Hannah told him to leave. He didn't listen. He kept coming back, gentle, persistent, always reminding her that I had left and he was still there. Maya couldn't stand watching it anymore. One afternoon she called me while I was on a job site, my hands covered in dust and my phone tucked between my shoulder and ear. I almost hung up when I saw her name. I figured she was just going to tell me to stay away like Hannah had wanted. But the first thing she said stopped me cold. Theo, if you still love Hannah, you need to come back. Right now. I didn't speak. She kept going. She didn't push you away because she didn't care. She did it because she thought she was doing the right thing for you. She cried after you left. She still cries. And now Alex knows the whole thing was fake from the beginning. He's been circling her ever since. She's confused and she's hurting and she thinks you believed every word she said that night. She thinks you're gone for good. I closed my eyes and leaned my forehead against the cold metal of the truck. All the nights I had spent telling myself she didn't want me started cracking apart. The things she had said, the way her voice had gone flat, the way she wouldn't look at me when she told me to go to Chicago, it all looked different now. She loves you, you idiot, Maya said, her voice cracking. She just didn't think she was allowed to keep you. I didn't wait to hear anything else. I told my foreman I needed a few days. I didn't even go back to the apartment to pack properly. I just got in the truck and started driving east. The whole way back to New York, I kept replaying every conversation we had ever had. Every time she had smiled at me across the table. Every time she had leaned into me like she trusted me to hold her up. Every time she had kissed me like she meant it. By the time I reached the city, it was already dark. I went straight to Gilded Spoon. Through the front windows, I could see her standing near the counter, still in her work clothes. Alex was in front of her, holding a bouquet of flowers, talking fast, like he was afraid she would walk away. She looked tired, smaller than I remembered. I parked the truck, got out, and walked inside. The bell above the door chimed. Hannah turned. When she saw me standing there, her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Theo? Alex turned too, his expression darkening the second he recognized me. What the hell is he doing here? I didn't look at him. I only looked at her. After 2 months of silence, after every night I had spent trying to convince myself she didn't want me, I was finally standing in front of her again. My voice came out rough from the long drive. I need to talk to you. She was gripping the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her eyes were already shining. Theo, I took one more step forward. No, this time let me talk first. Because last time I listened to what you said instead of looking at what was actually in your eyes. Alex moved like he was going to say something, but I finally turned to him. My voice stayed low and steady. At first it was fake. You're right about that. Then I looked back at Hannah. The rest of the words came out before I could stop them. But it stopped being fake for me a long time ago. Hannah didn't even look at Alex when she spoke. Leave. Her voice was quiet but steady. Alex stared at her like he hadn't heard right. Hannah, come on, you can't seriously. I can, she said, finally turning to face him. And I am. You heard what he said? It might have started as something fake, but it became real for both of us. You left me when I loved you. Theo stayed beside me when he had nothing to gain. That's the difference. Alex's face tightened. He glanced at me once, something ugly flashing in his eyes, then looked back at her. A fucking electrician? He said, voice low and mean. That's what you're choosing. Hannah didn't flinch. He gives me peace. He respects me. He loves me without making me feel like I have to become someone else to deserve it. That's more than you ever gave me. Alex stood there for another few seconds, breathing hard through his nose. Then he dropped the flowers on the counter and walked out without another word. The bell above the door rang once and went silent. The restaurant felt too quiet after he left. Hannah and I stood a few feet apart, neither of us moving. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying yet. I took one slow step closer and stopped. You shouldn't have come back, she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word. I had to. She shook her head. I said terrible things to you. I told you you were just a replacement. I made you believe I didn't want you. I know. I'm sorry, she said, and the tears finally slipped down her cheeks. I was scared. I thought if you stayed because of me, you would end up resenting me later. I thought letting you go was the only way to love you right. I closed the rest of the distance between us. I didn't touch her yet. I just stood close enough that she had to tilt her head back a little to look at me. You don't get to decide my future for me, Hannah. Not even if you think you're protecting me. She let out a shaky breath. I know that now. I was wrong. I hurt both of us because I was afraid. I reached up and brushed a tear from her cheek with my thumb. I'm sorry too. I should have seen what you were doing. I should have fought harder instead of believing the worst. She leaned into my hand. I love you, she said, the words coming out soft but certain. I loved you before I had the courage to admit it. You were never a replacement. I said that because it was the only way I could make you leave. I pulled her into my arms. She came without hesitation, pressing her face into my chest like she had been waiting 2 months to do exactly this. I held her tightly, one hand in her hair, the other around her back. For the first time since that night in her apartment, I let myself believe she was really here. We stayed like that for a long minute. When she finally pulled back just enough to look at me, her eyes were still wet but clearer. What about Chicago? She asked. I had already thought about it on the long drive back. I'm not giving up the job completely, but I talked to the foreman before I left. After the first few months on site, they're willing to let me work on shorter contracts. I'll go for a few weeks at a time and come back here in between. It won't be easy, but it's possible. She searched my face. You would do that? I'm not choosing between you and my future, I said. I'm choosing both. And I'm asking you to choose it with me. No more pretending we don't feel what we feel. No more deciding things for each other in secret. She nodded, fresh tears falling. Okay, I want that too. We didn't rush anything after that. I went back to Chicago for the next stretch of work, but I called her every night. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we just sat on the phone in silence because hearing each other breathe was enough. When I came back to New York, we started looking at spaces for her cafe together. I helped measure walls and check electrical panels. She picked out lights and paint colors. I installed every outlet, every switch, every string of warm bulbs that now hang over the counter at the Corner Light Cafe. On opening day, the place was fuller than either of us expected. People sat at the small wooden tables with books and laptops, ordered coffee and pastries, and complimented the lighting. Hannah moved behind the counter with a kind of quiet happiness I had never seen in her before. She wasn't performing anymore. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. That night, after the last customer left, she turned off most of the lights. Only the warm pendant bulbs above the counter in the reading corner stayed on. I put on the same slow song that had played at the wedding. When she turned around and saw me standing there with my hand out, she laughed softly. What are you doing? Asking my wife to dance, I said. She walked over and placed her hand in mine. Still fake? I pulled her close. It never really was. We moved slowly between the empty tables. Her head rested against my shoulder. I could feel her breathing steady and warm. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside this small cafe we had built together, everything felt still and right. I thought about the night she had sat across from me at Gilded Spoon and asked me to pretend. I thought about every lie we told and every truth that came out of those lies anyway. I thought about how I had once been willing to be whatever she needed for one night, and how that one night had turned into this. I was never just her fake husband. I was the man who chose her when she couldn't choose herself. And she was the woman who finally let herself be chosen. We kept dancing under the lights I had hung with my own hands, in the place she had dreamed of and we had built together. Neither of us said anything else for a long time. We didn't need to. Some stories start with the truth, ours started with a lie. But the lie brought us here, and here's where we chose to stay.